And my next question was that asking you if you have any role models, but we talked about it anyways. Would you like to expand on how they influenced you and how they guided you?
Yes. David was a very authentic man, and he knew who he was, and he stood firm in who he was. And when I met him, I didn't know who I was. I was very lost. I didn't even know what my favorite food was or what kind of music I liked. And he taught me to come to discover those things about myself. And his techniques were always very loving. And I was fortunate. He was like this master therapist for trauma, and and then he was an honorable man in the ceremonial world of our Indigenous teachings. And he slowly introduced me to first my feelings and how to cry and to acknowledge the harms and the pains that I have thrived through. And he slowly started to introduce me to a higher power, to a spirituality. These things I never knew before I met David. I never understood them in the way that I understand them now. And he slowly introduced me to self-love. And he would show me love through acts of kindness, whether that was making me blueberry pancakes, right? Or supporting me when I was going through a hard time, encouraging words, stories. He was full of stories. And it wasn't just me that he helped. There was a community of us that he would help. And many of us stay in touch. And many of us, David lives on through each and every one of us in those unique ways. For myself, it's passing on the teachings. It's empowering voices, empowering my own voice. I didn't have a voice when I met David. I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I wouldn't have been able to even have this conversation before.
How old would you say you were when you met David?
I was probably about 31, and I'm 46 now. Yeah, so I was a late bloomer at discovering who I am as a person and acknowledging my identity. So he helped me with that through all kinds of ways, from being on the land, from sitting and having tea in his living room, to going for truck rides and picking up wood so we could chop it for the sweat lodge. There were so many different ways that he would help people, and he taught me about holistic healing for myself, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And he used those stories and those teachings to help me to help myself. And he did all of that from a place of love and encouragement. And he helped me to be curious, about my song, about my dance, about dreaming, about wishing, having ambition for life, right? All these things that, coming from the home that I came from, I didn't have these things. And I shared with you earlier, the oldest of 4, I've lost 2 siblings.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. And one to overdose and one to suicide. And I have one sibling left who's teetering in the darkness of alcoholism. And so when I think about where I was to where I am now, for me, David was this hero,
So he basically gave you a safe space
Yes.
for you to explore yourself.
Yes.
Darla, what is it like being Indigenous in today's Canada?
Challenging.
I think we'd like to think that, we've improved a lot or completely, but, I don't think that's the reality. I think we still have many issues.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, we're coming up on our 10 years of Truth and Reconciliation. And in that decade, we have met 12 calls to action of the 94. So we have a long journey ahead of us. I believe my children will be doing this work as well. I think in a lot of ways we're progressing. We're doing some good things. I sit as a steering committee member for the BC First Nation Justice Council, And I have the honor of being able to contribute and be a voice to Bundle D, which is working on justice strategies for our women, our youth, and our education. And then sometimes I get to dabble a little bit in Bundle G for corrections and RCMP. And this is the work that I do as well. And, being able to have a voice and speak to the work that we need to continue to work on at a government level to have a better quality of life, a better quality of care and service, education, right, for our Indigenous people. It's a privilege for me to be able to have that and be a part of that small group of people, right? And to speak on behalf of all of our relations.
Would you say that there are some systematic hurdles you have to face as an Indigenous person?
Yes, ignorance.
Would you like to expand on that?
Whether that's conscious or unconscious ignorance, we have a lot of individuals who they're not living in the Indigenous worldview, and so there's not going to be an understanding. But there's also an ignorance to just understand, right? And we live in a place of denial because it's hard for people to come to terms with Canada's dark influence on Indigenous history, right? And to this day, we have a lot of people who turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the Canadian residential schools for Indigenous peoples, right? My father attended residential school and day school, and I'm part of the millennial scoop. And I have friends who were part of the 60s scoop. Our history really is younger than me. It's like maybe 44 years old. Our ceremonial practices have only been revived in the last 30 some years, right? And so even for myself, as an Indigenous person, I didn't know our history because they weren't being truthful and honest in the history that they were teaching in school when I was attending school, right here in Abbotsford. And I didn't come to find out until my 30s about residential school and that my father attended.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And so I'm first generation out of residential school, and my children are first generation because their father attended St. Mary's in Mission for 10 years. So our history is very fresh for many of our people, and many of our people are learning about those histories because our grandparents, our aunties, our parents, they never talked about those experiences. There was a lot of shame and pain around those experiences. And what I'm finding is this movement that more and more people are talking about it because we acknowledge that we have to talk about it to heal and to come to a place of forgiveness to truly be able to move forward in a unified way. And we have to stay curious. We have to have that child wonderment. That's why we have children. They remind us to stay curious because when we become adults, we get serious. We forget to laugh. We lose fun. Yeah. And so in a lot of the way that I would like to say raised in those 10 years by David, I got to connect with that child wonderment, right? And utilize the breadth of knowledge of my elder David and other elders like him, right? To help me on my journey. And, I think our people, we're striving to have a sense of belonging in the areas of community where we know we're entitled to have good care. And I speak about the healthcare system, the education system, bringing down our incarceration rates, our suicide rates, overdose rates, right? And I think our people are awakening, and I think others are too. And I always encourage people, in the words of Corey Wilson, to move from allyship to accomplice. Yeah.
That's a wonderful way of putting it, and I think that's what we need to do, especially in the wake of what's happening in the States. I think Canadians, they need to unite, and they it's not that they should stop thinking about their individuality, but it's time to rise above our differences and join hands.
Yes, I
Completely.
agree. Yep. We can all relate to those four feelings of fear and love and joy and sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know what that feels like.
Exactly.
Right? And to support each other through that, we need more kindness and understanding.
We definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of young people, they're talking about generational trauma, and now we know that it's a real thing and that it takes decades or sometimes, I don't know, I shudder to say centuries because I would like to think that it would not take us centuries to recover, but it takes us a long time to recover from damage done to our communities.
Yes, it does. And I know for myself, as somebody who lives with that intergenerational trauma, and some of that has even passed down to my children. And so we're still, they say 7 generations.
Mm-hmm.
We're only in our, what, 4th or 5th generation,
Yeah, there's
right?
a long way to go, sadly.
Yeah. And I think, though, through the work that I'm doing, the more that we can kind of feed that curiosity, it can bring understanding, and we can see each other with a different lens,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's going to be helpful, I think, in the long run. When we see each other with love, the same love that we were all created in, as opposed to, I can't even think of an example, but, a homeless man, right? A homeless man who's probably there because he's drug addicted, right? Well, that might not be the story. As somebody who got to work in the homeless shelter, I learned a lot of stories about how people became homeless. And a lot of them are from moving from another place for employment or a breakdown in a relationship.
Domestic abuse.
Domestic abuse. Yeah, runaways because home wasn't safe. And a lot of those stories didn't have anything to do with addiction, but life circumstances. But unfortunately, to numb out the pain of those life circumstances, addiction slips in.
And we're not immune to homelessness either.
No.
I mean, the economy is in a dire condition, and I think we're just one payment away from homelessness ourselves.
Yeah.
So we need to offer them kindness and understanding.
Definitely. My brother Jem, resting in peace, he lived more than half his life on the streets of Abbotsford, Mission, Squamish, Calgary is where he ended his life. And, I found that even though my brother lived on the streets, he was one of the kindest, most loving people. And he had your back no matter who you were, And I actually had that experience in Chilliwack. Recently, I was experiencing some maybe racism or prejudice being followed around in a store. And it was a homeless person that
came to
stood
your
up
aid.
to me.
Yeah. As a brown person myself, you go to shopping malls and they keep asking you, "Oh, do you need our assistance?" And we'd like to think that racism is gone. It's still there.
It's still there, and I made that security guard work. I went all over that store, even the places I didn't need to.
That's brilliant, actually.
If you want to follow me, we're going to burn some calories while we're at it.
That's a brilliant story. How would you describe your community? Because I think community helps you not only get to your goal, but it's part of your work. How would you describe your community, and how do you guys ensure not only diversity but a safe environment for your community?
I'm really fortunate. I get to be a part of all these different pockets of community. I have recently just been accepted into the Newcomers to Canada community by being a part of a documentary. And the people that I've come to meet through that experience are beautiful people and really opened my eyes to the experiences for individuals who are new to Canada, things that I never would have thought of, right? So I feel really lucky to be a part of that. And they have taught me lots of things that I can pass down to my kids. And we, can really take a moment and be like, a transition to a new place where you don't know the language and, you don't know the landscape, and like these are scary things, and you can have more empathy and understanding, right? And because I've worked so long and lived in this Indigenous worldview, this has been a really good experience for me to get outside of that bubble, right? And then I have the loving embrace of the church community, where I get to do work with Bridget from MCC, and I get invited into churches, and we get to do the Kairos blanket exercise, or I bring sacred spaces, and each of them are just so accepting and so welcoming. And I grew up here in Abbotsford, and for the first few years we were a Jehovah's Witness, but I was young. I didn't understand what that meant. And then my mom, when I was about a teenager, turned to Christianity. Again, I didn't understand that, right? And so I had no care, I guess, as a youth to even want to understand. But as an adult, I have invited Christians to come and have a sweat with me. And I have had ceremony with people from the church, and I have gone to their church to pray with them, right? So it's really beautiful. And then I get to be a part of this justice community where we're advocating for our people, and we're at the front lines, and we're doing the dirty work of trying to change policy at government levels, and we're trying to get a quality of care for people who are incarcerated or who are homeless or in addiction or going through the court system. We're standing with them in those courtrooms, right? And then I get to be a part of my art community. I am a lover of the theater and arts, and I get to go and enjoy the art of the community in different ways, and not just here in Abbotsford, but out to Vancouver or wherever I can find it, right? And share our love of art and expression, right? And do that even, in my own home with my paints or with my beadwork or my sewing projects, right? So there's lots of different pockets of communities that feed into the work that I do, because each of them are taking care of me, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And it's giving me purpose. And that's what David helped me with, was having a purpose. When you have a purpose and a sense of belonging, and everything that you take in, you become a master in that. You learn it, you practice it, and then you share it with others. And that's the ripple effect, right? And so all of these communities help me with that.
Talking about the ripple effect, how do you encourage others to make a change in their community, or make an impact in their communities?
I love that question, because a lot of times at the end of a sacred space, I will ask people, what did you learn, and how are you going to apply it in your life, in your workplace, in your community, right? My goal is that you take what feels good in the heart and the mind, and you share that with others, right? And I'm always encouraging people to stay curious, get to know your neighbors. Don't be afraid to talk to people, right? Some ways are inviting people. Like when I lived in Abbotsford, I live in Agassiz now, but when I lived in Abbotsford, I used to bring my big drum, my big powwow drum, to Mill Lake. And I would invite people to just come. Just come and drum. I'd like to sit next to a playground, because then the kids would come.
And then super curious.
The parents had no choice but to follow, right? And this is what I loved to do, was to share a part of what David shared with me and how that made me feel, and share that with others, right? And I encourage people to do that. If there's something that you're passionate about and it makes you feel so good, share that with others, because you don't know how that could really impact somebody. For David, he helped me to save my life by sharing his good medicine with me. And so I continue to share that good medicine with others.
I think there's this almost loneliness epidemic. People, they don't want to be a part of any communities. They're so afraid of maybe different opinions, or maybe a lack of acceptance, that they don't mingle anymore. And I wasn't raised here. I was raised in India, and personal space does not exist in South Asian families. And it's not that you're forced to form a community, but and the idea of not having a community, it baffles me. And I think it's been so normalized in North American culture that people, they don't see communities anymore, sadly.
Yeah.
And if you see communities, they label you as an activist.
Isn't that the truth? No, I would have to agree. I mean, for most of my life, I grew up away from Siksika. I was taken when I was 3 from Siksika. So I didn't get to be raised in my Indigenous community. I was raised here in Abbotsford. And I had a very difficult time with a sense of belonging and a sense of community here. But once I started to heal, once I started to flourish and thrive, I started to find that sense of belonging and sense of community. And I think there's this horrible thing called social media that has divided us.
It has.
Right? And we're much more comfortable sitting behind our screens, texting somebody. When I was young, we had no problems going and knocking on somebody's door and can so-and-so come out to play, or, picking up the phone and having a phone call. And nowadays people just don't do that. And I think we're just afraid. We're living in so much fear that we're missing out on life.
Yeah. I think a lot of Gen Zers would like to think that they're not, they've risen above racism or prejudices, but I think a lot of us, we just mask our discriminatory ideas with humor. I think it's so easy to just propagate hate online because you just feel like there are no direct repercussions, and it's crazy. I would not say that social media is inherently bad. You can also find great communities online. But I completely agree with you. It's so easy just spewing hate online. And it has divided us. And it makes us think that we're more different than we actually are from each other.
Yes, what online has done has taken the heart connection away.
Exactly.
There's no tone online. The tone is defensiveness. Yeah. But here, we're having this heart connection. We can see each other's body language. We're engaged. Our facial expressions. We're having a heart connection here. But online, you don't get that.
No.
And you're coming from your place of whatever mood or environment you're sitting in. Right?
Completely.
And that's the projection that you're putting out.
Also, I think it's difficult having individual opinions online because either you support one group or the other group, and it makes us think that okay, there's more division than there actually might be.
Yes.
Completely.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like communicating online or in texting. Like, can we have a phone call instead? You can't hear my tone, or even in work emails. I don't mean for this to sound mean. You can't hear my tone of voice. I'm just going to say it's almost like you have to prepare people so that the defense can come down.
That's the same struggle that I face. I tell people online, okay, let's just talk face to face because I think I'm more interesting in real life than I am online. Would you like to share any highlights from your journey?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I had this beautiful moment. I brought the big drum, the big floor drum, to Chief Dan George School. And I was asked to come in and drum with some students. And there were some students that were part of a special ed class. I'm not sure if that's the right term. And there was a young girl in that class. And she had a lot of body movements, and they weren't sure, how she was going to handle being around the drum. And it turned out that she absolutely loved the drum, and she sat on the floor and just put her hands on it, and all her body twitches and everything just stopped and calmed. And we were drumming, and she was just sitting there in a totally relaxed state with the drum, and it put a lump in my throat that day. It brought a lot of emotion for me that her whole being could have calmness with the sound of the drum. And then we had a hard time prying her away from the drum when I needed to leave. But it was such a beautiful moment. And, this is what that good medicine can do for the hearts and the minds of the people. And You know, I find whenever I bring, no matter where I go with sacred spaces, people are always really impacted by it, whether that's an emotion that they feel or a physical reaction, or, you know, I had this experience at Mill Lake, and I went there on an Indigenous day, and there was really nothing going on. This was before, you know, this is probably like 10 or more years ago, where it wasn't really being acknowledged or hyped up, right? And I just brought that drum, like I shared with you earlier, and people just started coming over, right? And for me, that was the first time that I had done something like that. And I was kind of scared to do it because I'm like, here I am in the park drumming by myself by some tree.
I'm exposing myself to some hate.
Yeah. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. I've sat in circles with men and women who are incarcerated. And I was informed by staff before I even went into the rooms that, you know, they were not cooperative, they're not going to participate, they might give you attitude. And I never, ever once had that experience, ever, in the years that I've been working with individuals who are incarcerated. I had 27 women laying on their bellies on the floor coloring pictures while I shared teachings about the medicine wheel. And then we had this beautiful circle of conversation afterwards. And I had a similar experience with the men, but they weren't on their bellies on the floor, right? But they were definitely more relaxed in the circle. And we had men who were opening up and being vulnerable enough to share tears in front of other men in an institution. Right. I've had moments with elders who have never drummed on a drum before, but have always wanted to try. And at 80 some years old, finally sitting down at a drum and getting to have that experience and being overwhelmed with tears of joy because of what that felt like for them. And I've had moments with kids in care. I've done cultural camps with kids in care. And I had this one little girl. Oh man, she was so sweet. She was sitting next to me, and I was explaining to her the teachings of the tobacco and why we offer the tobacco to the drum as an acknowledgement of that spirit, the animal that gifted its life up for the people so that we could have this drum. And she was having a hard time with that, right? This tobacco and this representation. And so she followed procedure and protocol, and we did our protocol. We offered our good intentions or our prayers or whatever. And then afterwards she said, oh, I get it. Because the tobacco dances when you're drumming, the tobacco bounces, right? She's like, I get it. The prayers were going up and the tobacco was going back to the land. But just like, her sweetness, her innocence, like it actually makes my nose tingle to recall that how her whole being comprehended that experience.
And that's so poetic.
Yeah, so poetic. Like, again, it gave me like a lump in my throat. I was like, this is so beautiful to witness this, you know, and to have those experiences, even when I invite people. Actually, I came here to the University of the Fraser Valley several years ago. I was just starting out with sacred spaces, and I was invited into a psychology class. And I walked into that classroom, and you know how the desks are all lined, right? This isn't going to work for a sacred space. We need to be in a circle. So got everybody, rearranged the classroom, got them in a circle, talked about the medicine wheel and some other teachings that came up. And then we had a sharing circle after. And after, there was a woman that said, I want to thank you because I've been in this class for so many months, and I have never been introduced to other classmates in this way.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you for creating this space to be able to do that. And then there was another fellow in the circle. I forget where he was from. I want to say some like a small village in Africa somewhere. And he had said, listening to you speak about the sweat lodge reminded me of back home. We have the same kind of ceremony, but we do it in a little bit of a different way. And so I said, if you would like to join me for a sweat, You are more than welcome to, anybody. And you know what? He came, and we had a sweat together. And hearing his teachings in that UEP ceremony and how they were so similar to my teachings from totally different parts of this Mother Earth, and the connectedness that we had in that moment. Oh, you can't, like, where are you going to find that?
Exactly. Yeah, we the people, we have more in common than we think.
Yes.
Darla, what are some of the misconceptions about Indigenous people that you'd like to clear?
That we're freeloaders. You know, it's, as an Indigenous person, the proper information doesn't get out to mainstream society. And there's a lot of misconceptions about Indigenous peoples and all this apparent money that we get from the government, right? And I tell you, if we would not be living in Third World War conditions in some of our reservations. We would not be $3,000 to $5,000 underfunded per student in our on-reserve schools. Some of our on-reserve schools would actually be certified, and we could graduate our students in our communities, right? I find that the government and social media play a certain way in the way that they relay information, and it's very uninformed, and it creates a lot of hostility. I've always paid taxes. I am Indigenous, and I have always paid taxes. I just want to make that clear. I am not living a tax-free life, right? This is a big assumption that we're always faced with. There are some communities that don't have to pay taxes, but there's a lot of stipulations that come with that they have to meet.
It's more nuanced.
Yes.
And this is why I think we need more diverse voices, you know, because what the media propagates is they blame individuals when it's not individuals. It's the higher ups, the corporations.
Yes.
And it's just a distraction from real issues. You know, they'd like to propagate more division.
Yes.
Just so we won't focus on the actual pressing issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, another thing that I find really frustrating is that we might have, maybe there's been a harm that involves an Indigenous person, and they'll do like a whole page in the newspaper or a good chunk of the news on TV about it. But yet, when we have good things happen, it's like a little tiny sentence or two
that happened
under a photo, right? There's no elaboration on the good, on the positive, right? And I want people to know that as Indigenous peoples, we are thriving, and we're thriving strongly in ways that are going to be setting our future generations up for some really healthy, good living. Right. And I want to acknowledge my brother. We're like adopted brother and sister, Indigenous, grew up in foster care. He graduated from UVic. He is a lawyer, an Indigenous lawyer. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
You know, I have 2 friends who are attending UVic, both of them going for Indigenous studies in different capacities. Amazing. Right? We have Indigenous people who are graduating, Indigenous people who are becoming doctors and football players and, you know, song artists. And like, we're doing a lot of really good things in our communities as well. And I really encourage people to attend a gathering or a powwow or, you know, be a guest at one of the Indigenous functions going on in the community. We just had a justice forum in Chilliwack. You know, go and see all of the Indigenous people there who are lawyers, who are part of Crown, who are judges even, right? Like, these are all Indigenous people doing good work in their communities, but they don't even know about them, right? So I think just getting to know goes back to getting to know your neighbor, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about time we see marginalized communities as something other than just victims. You know, we're working. towards a better future. And I think we're accomplishing a lot of things. We don't hear about it, but we are.
Yes.
All of us communities. What are some of the ideas, according to you, that have the potential of making great changes around the world?
Great changes around the world. Well, the first thing that comes to me is just going back to when we were talking about kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness creates great change, right? Being educated creates great change.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean educated in an institution like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean life educated,
Mm-hmm.
right? And spending time with people and having those heart connections. Creating great change in the world is going to rely on like-minded people unifying together
Mm-hmm.
and working towards the common goal of whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. And really just knowing from one human to another that we want a better quality of life for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are all sacred, we are all lovable, we are loved, and we are deserving, and we matter.
Thank you so much, Darla. It's been an absolute joy talking to you.
Hi.
And no problem.
Likewise.
And I wish you from my team's behalf as well, and I wish you the best for your future, and keep it up.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Blessings.
Blessings your way as well.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
It's time for the Fraser Valley Cultural Diversity Awards. Each year, nominations are accepted from individuals, organizations, and programs that work towards building an inclusive community, providing their clients, customers with accessible environments, and having reflective workforces. The award ceremony will be at the evening of Thursday, March 6, 2025 at the Clarion Hotel and Conference Center in Abbotsford. Let's celebrate with a delicious dinner together. The nominations form is available at diversityawards.ca.
Researchers at Kwantlen Polytechnic University are seeking participants for their health survey from January to March 2025. The study seeks to understand the associations among key health-related behaviors, environment, and individual outcomes. Participation is voluntary and is composed of a 20-minute online survey related to your health and behaviors. You must be 18 years or older to participate. Contact healthstudy@kpu.ca for more information. Upon completion of the survey, participants are eligible to enter into a weekly draw for several Canadian Amazon gift cards, ranging from $50 to $200. So what are you waiting for? Fill out the health survey to win now.
ただいま、電話に出ることができません。
もしもし、あれ、留守番電話か。ちょっとでも聞いて。なんか、カナダの大学行っとる日本人学生3人がやっとるラジオ番組やってさ、もうそれがめっちゃおもろいんよ。留学生活の本音語り合いよって、楽しいことだけじゃなくってさ、やっぱり。異文化の壁とか悩みとか、なんか正直に話しよってほんま聞かな損やで、これ。毎週木曜の5時からオンエアやけん。忘れんといてな。
ここ UFV アボツフォードキャンパスからズバズバトリオが毎週午後5時から CIBL101.7FM 92.3FM で放送されます。お見逃しなく。
Hi, this is Kai Nagata from Deprogram. You're listening to CIVL 101.7 FM at UFV Abbotsford, serving the Fraser Valley. Go deep, go rogue, Deprogram.
Hi everyone, this is Angelina Joseph and we are broadcasting from Civil 101.7 FM in Abbotsford and 92.3 FM in Chilliwack at UFE Abbotsford campus. We would like to begin by acknowledging we are situated on the traditional and unceded lands of the Stolo Nation, whose territory stretches across the Fraser Valley in British Columbia. This project is a partnership with Archway, and we are interviewing nominees of the Fraser Valley Cultural Diversity Awards. Today, I am with Christine Seymour. Thank you for joining us, Christine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy to spend some time with you this morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Likewise. Absolutely. So if you'd like to please introduce yourself and what have you been nominated for? Give us the gist.
Eilatith, Slacia, Casta Chochat, Thalsquich, Talitzo Qua Chochwiuk, Shaishkoit, Casta, Holy Holtel, Squalix, Tilshochwali, and I'm Aluyathiukwasai Tetsiaist Lawel. I'm really happy to be here this morning. My traditional name that has been handed down to me from generations is Chochat and Silesia. My English name is Christine, and I'm really happy to be here with you this morning and to talk a little bit about the Diversity Award. I'm happy to introduce myself in my language. I'm not fluent in my language. However, I've been teaching my language since I was a new teacher over 20 years ago. In our culture, when you introduce yourself, it's important to introduce your elders and your family that have raised you and stood you up. And I introduced my parents, Shaishkowit, Gwendolyn Point, and Holy Hotel is my father's traditional name, Stephen Point. I've been nominated for the Cultural Diversity Award, and it's been an honor to be recognized in that way in our community.
Congratulations. Thank you so much for that. That was so profound, like genuinely the way you introduce yourself in your native language, and it just really touched me. And so moving on, how does it feel to be recognized with this nomination, both personally and professionally? What would you say it means to you?
Well, it gives me hope for our future generations.
Right.
And I think that oftentimes when you work as a professional, you aim to make change for future generations. And I was aware of these awards. I didn't imagine getting nominated for one, and it's an honor. When I was going to school, as a young person, as an Indigenous young person, my experience probably wasn't as hard as my father's or my grandparents. All of my grandparents attended residential school. My father was the first generation in the Chilhuyuk territory. I'm from the Chilhuyuk tribe, and we reside on the Chilhuyuk territory. When the settlers first came, they couldn't say Chilhuyuk. Instead, they said Chilliwack. And so Chilhuyuk is the name of my nation and the territory. But my father, him and his brothers and my Uncle Jeff, they were the first generation that were allowed to attend public school in the Chilliwack, the Chilhuyuk territory. Right. I imagine my school experience wasn't as hard as theirs, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to fit in. As an Indigenous child, my experience of the school system was different than other children. And as a teacher, it was my aim to remove barriers in the school system so that kids could attend school and experience have a better experience than I did. So a diversity award in our community, it's my hope it means that what I reflect on is my father gifted a canoe to the province of British Columbia.
Wow.
And it's in the museum in Victoria. And I remember at one school presentation, a principal asked my dad, why did you gift that canoe and what did it mean? And while it represents a teaching of our people that we all are in the same canoe. We have to paddle together regardless of where we come from.
That's amazing.
So when I think about this award, I think about the teachings of my elders and the teachings that my father's passed down, Stephen Point, to me, that we're here now together. We have to learn to work together for our future generations. So it gives me hope. That's what I've worked for as a teacher and now as a principal, and to make change so that we can paddle in the same canoe, go in the same direction, and work together, regardless of where we come from.
Right. That's amazing. Wow. You inspire me. That is so amazing to hear. Wow. So moving on though, tell us a bit about your history. I know you touched a little bit upon it, but like, what path, opportunities have your life taken to bring you where you are today with this work that you do? Since you spoke a little bit about change making and all of us being on the canoe, just a little bit more, yeah.
Well, I'm fortunate enough to have a very strong mother. Her name is Gwen Point, and she's had an incredible life, an incredible journey since a very young person. She's raised her family and put herself through school. And she's been pivotal in much of the change in education system, provincially and locally, in the Chilliwack School District, the Chilliwack School District. And but she was very much impactful in my education journey as well. She was insistent that I go to school.
Right.
And I'm thankful because school wasn't easy for me. And for that reason, I'm thankful she helped me finish. But also what it gave me was it gave me a goal and direction to do the same what she did for me, for younger people, especially my younger Indigenous brothers and sisters in school. I wanted to show them that they could do it, that they could finish. You know, in the 80s, Indigenous grad rates were as low as 7%, and they haven't increased much since, but they have with the work. I shouldn't say they haven't, but they have increased gradually since the 80s. We definitely aren't at 7% anymore. And we're working to improve those graduation rates for our Indigenous students. And so I really believe that the only way we can move forward is if we put our differences aside and we work together. I think that we need to role model for our young people
100%, yeah.
how we want them to work together, to collaborate. And just like that canoe, what we say in our language is letsamot, letsathalla, in our language that represents a really big teaching of one heart and one mind. And I really believe that we need to stand up and follow those teachings, and especially in the school system, and role model that for our young people, because that's how we want them to carry themselves, to take care of one another, no matter where they come from or what background they come from.
Right, to really know your roots and to really be grounded, right, at the end of the day, because they're your people and they're your family.
Yes.
Right? That is so true. Wow. So since you mentioned a little bit on like from the themes that I understood, you mentioned themes of like inclusivity and diversity, the aspects of those, and then the idea of community then therefore comes to the forefront, right? Because that's the epitome of community, diversity, inclusivity, acceptance, all of that. So what communities are you involved in, and how have they positively impacted the work you do today?
I come from the Scout First Nation,
right,
and that's one of the communities within the Chilliwack tribe, the Chilliwack Nation there, and and I've grown up on the Schuylkill First Nation territory with my family, with all of my uncles and all of my aunties.
Right.
I'm fortunate enough to be raised with my culture. So what makes I hope I'm answering your question right. And when you think about Canada and the residential school era, the residential school era really did what they set out to do. Over 100 years ago, Canada had 59 different languages spoken in Canada, from different tribes and different nations.
Wow.
In 2007, the Canadian government determined that there were only 3 languages left, and 3 languages that were fluent. And none of those languages resided here in British Columbia. We have 39 different languages in BC that were spoken from the tribes throughout the province. All of those are either endangered or extinct. But this loss in language from 59 to 3 languages isn't just a reflection, a loss of language. It's also a reflection, the loss of our culture. But I was fortunate enough to be raised by my family, my parents, and my community. With our community ended up being able to hold on to some of our culture.
Right.
So I was raised by my uncles and my aunties, my Uncle Jeff, my parents, and with our longhouse and with our paddling and powwow dancing and singing and the sweat lodge. You don't see that in very many communities throughout Canada. I mean, various communities experience a different amount of culture and language, but if you think about the loss in 59 to 3, every community is unique.
For sure,
yeah. I think my experience with the culture that I'm very privileged to be raised with has allowed me to share that within the school district and within the communities in a humble way. And I've been able to share powwow dancing and paddling and revitalize our culture and language throughout the community and the territories. And it's been an honor and a humbling. It's been an honor to do so in a good way. I think that what I was told is by now there was our young people are going to start walking out of their territories with their regalia and speaking their language, and I'm starting to see that. And I can say I've been a part of that. That'll mean a lot to me because I really believe that they'll get a connection to who they are, to who their ancestors are. They'll learn the language and the worldview and the teachings of our people, and our communities will heal. And so being a part of that cultural revitalization within the Chilkoot territory and the school district has meant a lot to me. I believe it's the healing pathway and part of the reconciliation time that we're looking at currently within the territory.
Yeah, no, wow. I could listen to you talk all day, like you talk so beautifully, actually. Wow, that's just, sometimes I'm like speechless. Do I even go to the next question or what?
And it's up to you.
Oh no, but this is genuinely amazing. I'm so glad that we're getting to do this. Yeah, wow. So can you share specific highlights or moments that you'd say stand out to you in your journey about when you were, building more inclusive environments and you were creating that diversity or creating opportunities for that in the environment, in the community?
I've been a part of various initiatives in the community and in the school district.
Right.
I think really I stand on the shoulders of my parents and my ancestors. And I'm very humbled to say so. And that's really the teachings of our people. We follow in the footsteps of our ancestors and my parents. And I get emotional because, you know, our journey wasn't as tough as theirs. I know my parents faced a significant amount of barriers and racism, but they didn't feel sorry for themselves. They were strong and they worked to remove those barriers. So really, when I think about my journey, I instantly think about theirs. My dad was one of the first Indigenous students on the UBC campus.
Oh wow,
There
that's an
was
honor.
only a handful of students at UBC when he went to law school, so my parents ran the Chilliwack Powwow for 17 years in Chilliwack, and I was able to chair the committee for a significant amount of years. And although they moved away and had different roles, it's still, I think it really bridged a lot of the community members and created a space where we could collaborate and learn from one another, and it became quite a community event. And so, but I've also and when I think about my professional experience, I think about teaching the language. One of my favorite experiences was while I was teaching was when I had non-Indigenous students learning Halkomelem.
Wow.
And I really loved that. I loved that. And one of my students, he was on the football team. He actually was sort of the star of the football team, I imagine anyway. And he was really well known throughout the school, and I remember we were sitting in our language class and a football team walked by in the school and they had their suits on. They dressed up when it was game day.
Right.
And I remember they said hello to us in Halkomelem. And so, you know, when you have one speaker left and we only have one speaker left for the Halkomelem language. Halkomelem is endangered. And so it was just so meaningful for not only our non-Indigenous classmates to learn the language, but to teach their teammates and to have the language spoken in the school. And so I think it was one of my favorite moments as an educator. So, I've always worked to share with my students and my colleagues that, one of my favorite things that I heard was from Commissioner Sinclair. He said, we weren't a part of the problem that caused the residential schools and the divide, but we have the opportunity to be a part of the solution. And so, and what does that look like? And I think it's working together and learning the language together. We can't do it alone. I can't revitalize the language alone as a stalwart woman. I have to do it in collaboration with my colleagues and our administration and all of our students. And so when we start working together and for a common goal, then I think that we're going to move forward. It gives me hope. It gives me hope that we can revitalize the language. I don't think we're going to save the language or any of the languages until we work together.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So since you mentioned Halkomelem, and so a little bit about myself, I'm an international student from Dubai. So this I've always wanted to. So since I guess my first semester wanted to learn Halkomelem, but I didn't want to overstep or anything.
Please. My favorite experience was I always worked with teachers and went through classes and said, we have to do this together. And then I moved school districts a few years ago. I'm in Fraser Cascade School District as a district principal here.
Wow.
And I was gassing up my car one morning and I heard, Mrs. Seymour, Mrs. Seymour. And I turned and I thought, oh, I don't know. And it was one of the teachers I worked with in Chilliwack. He said, I'm taking Halkamalam and I'm teaching Halkamalam in a kindergarten language. And I said, any words that you teach will be words that we save in the language, if it's 10 words or 20 words. And so, but we can't do that. I can't do that alone. We have to do it together. And I think that's the lesson. If we want to move forward, if we want to recover what was lost, like the language, we aren't going to be able to do it unless we work together.
Right. Yeah. Good. So if you don't mind me asking, how do you say hello in Halkamalam?
A swale. Yes.
Swale.
And swale describes the first light that comes up in the morning of the day. So we never really, in our language, we didn't have a word for hello or goodbye. And so our elders have worked since the 70s, and my late grandfather was one of them.
Right.
And they've created words, and now Acewell is commonly used in our communities as a greeting. Hello. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And since you said there's no goodbye or bye, do you just say Acewell again when you're like parting or no?
What our elders used to say was Hioth Method. Hioth Method. That means take care of yourself.
Hioth Method.
But they did put a word. Yeah. Hioth Method. They did put a word together. Quitslama, it translates to see you.
Quitslama?
Yeah, so that's sort of not a new word, but a word we use today for goodbye as communities change and family, and our people aren't the same. We don't live the same as we did 100 years ago, and our language has changed. So we use Acewell and we use Quitslama. Those two words are commonly used within our territories. Yeah.
Oh, I'm loving this. This is amazing.
So please take the language course. We have to work together.
100%. I'm so excited. So down. Like absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And you spoke so much about the people in your life, the community, your parents, your uncle, your aunt. So in that essence, what kinds of people would you say you surround yourself with, and what do you do to encourage those around you and to make a difference in their communities? You've spoken so much about language, you've spoken so much about preserving and healing and reconciliation and all of that. So how would you say you tie all of that together for the community, for the coming generations?
Well,
sorry, that was a lot.
That's okay. I'm very fortunate to have grown up with the culture, and when I'm not at work, I end up being at home in my community and with my family, and practicing my culture. Whether if it's in the winter, we're in our sacred longhouse ceremonies, or in the spring we're paddling, and I love dancing in the summer.
Oh.
And so oftentimes we do talk about living in maybe two worlds, but I don't know if I don't like saying that, because but it is a reality. We have our work, and then we go home, and we have our cultural life and our cultural home, and we navigate both. Many of the Stalo community members navigate both of those areas in our life. And so I find that I just get surrounded by our cultural aspect of the life in our family, and I get opportunity to be with elders and knowledge keepers, and I really love my family so much. I think when I think about my uncles and my mom and my parents' generation, what they went through to hold on to what little culture and language we have left.
Right.
And what my grandparents went through. My grandfather was the last speaker, and my grandmother as well, and we lost so much in my grandparents' generation, and it was my parents' generation that really fought to hang on to it. So now I find that I'm in the community, and I am a principal. I work to learn the culture, and I work to pass it down the same way my parents, my uncles and aunties have passed it down to me, if I can be a part of that. So I try to share the culture within the schools,
Right.
and the language. And I find in the schools, people are, we're at a place now in the schools where teachers are really working to implement the culture into the curriculum. So there's a lot of work to be done yet.
That's
so
true.
yeah. So I hope that answers. I know
Oh yeah, it did.
myself, I end up, my schedule is busy between work and my cultural life, so I don't really get much of a choice. Because we follow the powwow trail and the paddling trail, and oftentimes it's hard to keep up between two aspects, our cultural life and our professional life.
Yeah. No, I understand 100%. And
yeah.
But that's what makes you, right? There's different aspects that come together to make you,
Yes.
or and any individual for that matter. And you're doing incredibly well. You really, I feel, from just this interview, I just feel like you're really balancing well. You're really putting those two aspects together in such harmony. So genuine inspiration. Like I'm just gonna say it. Genuine inspiration. That's what you are. Wow.
Thank you, Haichika. Thank you. You hope that, when you're busy and you have work to do, and there's lots of work to be done in our communities and in our district. Our communities still have the highest rates of suicide and the highest rates of addiction, and so we have a lot of work ahead of us yet, a lot of healing. And so if anything, this award just maybe helps me believe that we're moving in the right direction, that we're doing the work that needs to happen for our young people.
Right.
And so thank you so much.
No, thank you. And just like taking from your previous answer, and so you put it out really well. So just kind of taking from that, what kind of ideas would you say have the potential to make positive change in the world? And what specific changes would you like to see in your community going forward? And just from a worldview perspective, a Canada perspective, all of that.
I think that I do my best to carry the teachings from my family. I'm a Stala woman from the Chilkoot tribe. I was raised by my parents and my family, and very fortunate and privileged to be raised in a cultural way. And it is my job to take those teachings and pass them on. I guess the one teaching that I hold on to and that I do my best to follow is the Letsamot Letsathala, one heart and one mind.
Wow.
And I think about the canoe my dad made for the province.
Right.
I think we really need to recognize that we're here. Nobody's going anywhere. That's what he said. He said, nobody's going anywhere. We need to realize we're in the same canoe and paddle and work together.
Right.
Same direction. that direction might change, our goals might change, but if we can work together for wherever we're working to go. But I think with the same time, we need to really take a look at where we are and where we have been.
Right.
I didn't understand that piece for truth and reconciliation for a long time in my early years of education as a young teacher. But really telling the truth about where we are will help us see what we have left to do.
Right.
Even with just the language, we tell the truth and recognize the loss that's happened with just the language. It helps us realize the work we have left to do. We only have one speaker for our language in the Indigenous language of this territory in the Fraser Valley.
Right.
Well, that directs us to that we need to revitalize the language. Are we taking the steps to do so? Are we working together to do so?
Right.
And so I think that I don't know that I have any vision except for that I rely on the teachings that have been passed on to me by my family and my elders and my ancestors. And it's instilled in our language. It's instilled in our worldview that we take care of the land, that the ancestors are our land. It's instilled that we walk carefully on the land, and what our elders say is they're walking on the backs of our ancestors. Right. And so there's so many teachings that come from my ancestors and from my parents and my uncles and my aunties that I don't claim to have, that I just try to follow and pass down and revitalize and work to pass on the way I didn't have to fight for it the way my parents had to.
Right.
My grandparents' generation, not all of those kids came home from the residential school.
Yeah. I heard,
and I've lost close family members to the residential school, and my parents' generation, therefore, they had to fight for the culture and fight for the language.
Right.
And I don't have to, and it's my hope that my kids don't have to.
Right.
They can speak their language and practice their culture, and the community will uphold them in doing so, and will uphold one another like our ancestors tell us, Let's-a-thala. One heart and one mind will paddle in the same canoe.
Wow. One heart and one mind.
Yes.
I'm going to steal that and take that with me.
It's a teaching. I'm so happy to share it with you.
Thank you. No, thank you. And then what would you say is that one small act that someone can do to help create a more inclusive environment, whether Indigenous or not? Like, in general, what would you say is that one small act that someone can do?
Oh boy. I think I don't mean to keep going back to the language, but that's where my heart goes.
No, that's okay.
And I guess, my background is in science.
Wow.
I had to teach a science course in every school I've walked into, in every school district I've always had to teach the language. And I think that, I don't think, and the reason I go back to the language is because I think it really is a community goal. Even if it's not, even if it's my language and not your language, I think it should be our community goal to revitalize and save the language. So if you learn one word in the language, that would mean the world to me. It would say so much. It would say so much to my younger Indigenous brothers and sisters to hear you speak the language. It was a few years ago, the Chilliwack radio station was sharing a word a day.
Right.
And I couldn't keep up to it when I moved to this position. It was quite a learning curve in this position in this school district. But to share a word a day would be would be great to learn a word or a greeting in the language. And our worldview and our culture and our way of life and was in our language, and we're working really hard to revitalize language. And I think that's a community goal. Yeah. And it speaks a lot to our collaboration and working together.
So true.
Inclusivity within the community.
Yeah. And if it helps, I'm taking two words today. Israel and oh my gosh, how do you say it? Kwitslama. Yes, Kwitslama.
Yeah. Or Letzamat and Letzathala. One heart and one mind.
Sorry, say that again, please.
Letzamat.
Latsaman.
Letzathala. It's yes. Thank you so much.
No, wow, that's amazing. And before we let you go, would you like to share just a few words of wisdom and just well wishes for your fellow nominees?
Oh, just good luck, and it's an honor to be recognized with you, and I just wish you the best. I just wish everyone the best, and looking forward to the evening. So
that's amazing. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you. And Kwitslama. I hope to see you. I hope to see you sometime. I definitely would love to meet you in person and get to know you more.
That would be great. Maybe we could have some tea sometime or something. Yeah.
Totally. I'd love to learn your culture and just, integrate. It's just so profound to have people who have, mentalities and just that mindset to really grow, to change, to build. And while doing all of that, be inclusive and accepting of everyone else. It's hard to find that, and it's truly an honor to have someone like that in the community. So thank you so much.
Aichika, thank you. Thank you too for your time this morning. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.